Hello everyone and welcome to another live training session. Today we are doing Merry Fragmas 2.0 first-person shooter multiplayer networking, reloaded I guess, since this is a sort of a repeat from last year. So my name is Geig, and I hope you are all doing fantastic today. So let's go ahead and get to it. So last December, we did a Merry Fragmas where we did networking multiplayer, and we used Photon and built a first-person shooter. It was a three-day thing. So this year, I wanted to try to get it all done in one session. It might be a slightly longer session, but I'm going to try to get it done in one session. And we're not going to use Photon. We're going to utilize Unity's new built-in networking and multiplayer service. Furthermore, I'm not going to really cover a lot of the concepts of the first-person shooter since they're all very much the same. So if you are curious, you can check out part 1 of that 3-day part from last year because the concepts are all going to be pretty much identical. And I'll link all that stuff when I end up posting this. So today what we're going to do is we are going to get up and running with a first-person shooter quickly. We're going to look at some alternative ways of doing some stuff, and then we're going to get right into the networking. We're going to look at a few fundamental principles of networking and how they're handled in Unity. We're going to get a multiplayer game up and running. We're going to add, networking, obviously networking, multiplayer, lobby. We're going to look at a bunch of different ways of doing stuff, and so some stuff that can help you kind of go from there and how to grow and how to learn how to do some more stuff. Anyway, let me go ahead and just say real quick, as always, before we get started, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, you feel free to reach out to us on Twitter at Unity3D, at the Ant Ranch, at Will Goldstone, at Matt Mirafish, and at Mike Geig, which is me. So, hello. Okay, so let's get down to business. We do sort of have to hit the ground running. So what I have here already open is the Unity Stealth project. And let me just go ahead and open up and show you this from the asset store. It's free, it's on the asset store. It was built for Unity 4, so the scripts and the animations and stuff might be a little bit outdated, but that's fine because we're not actually using any of those. We are simply using the art assets, the environment, and so that's what I have set up here. So some of the stuff I've already done is I've gone through this scene and I've removed any animations, any scripts, any characters, anything that just wasn't the environment, anything, that was part of the stealth project per se. And let me turn these light probes off here. There we go. So I've already removed that stuff. I've also already baked my lighting, so my light is completely baked at this point. So it's just sort of ready to go. I've removed the lasers, anything that didn't belong. I've updated all the materials to be the new standard shader, and this is effectively what we have. All right. I've also put all the game objects under this one world game object, and then I've put this world game object on this locked layer, and then in my layers tab I've simply locked the locked layer, so I don't accidentally click on anything in the scene and select it, so I don't have to worry about accidentally always clicking on the scene and highlighting stuff. I just can't click on it there. Alright, so a few other things that I've already done. First off is I have this capsule person. This is the one asset today that you guys won't have because it's just someone internally made it and I'm using it. But it's really not a big deal. I just use this instead of a traditional capsule because I think it looks fun. But otherwise, we're just going to be using something that is the white capsule. Also, I'm using this candy cane here. And this candy cane is from the free Christmas assets low poly from our asset store. You can see the beautiful candy cane there. I'm also using some audio clips, so I'm using this party noisemaker clip here on freesound.org. You can check out. I don't see where the username is listed, so I don't know what the username of the person that made it, but you can go to this link. You could look it up yourself. I'm also using this Jingle Bells song right here, and you can see the licensing stuff and the website and stuff like that there. So these are the things that I'm using for today. So if you want to follow along or when you watch this video or whatever, those are the things you're going to need. Some last a couple things I did in here is I added an audio mixer for the two sounds, simply so that we can very quickly and easily mix these and change volumes. I have exposed the volume parameter of the master audio, which we're going to use to mute it so we don't want our music playing all the time when we're trying to learn and trying to do stuff. So yeah, that's another thing that I've done there. And then finally, I have a couple prefabs in here. I have some scripts already. We're going to look at all of these as they become relevant. Okay. So just know that there's a few extra things in here. And with the exception of this capsule guy, it's all going to be provided for you. So sorry about that one. You could just use this plain white capsule. Okay. So let's just sort of get right into it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to import the first person character controller. So I'm not reinventing the wheel there. So I'm going to go to Assets, Import Package, and then Characters. Now, one of the issues we had last year, I'm going to import everything. One of the issues we had last year is right after doing the video, the standard assets were updated internally by our team and then distributed. So all of my code stopped working, and everyone on the forums was like, oh man, how do we make it work with this new code? And you know, all this stuff had to get posted. It was a total pain. So this year, while we're using the standard first-person controller, we're not actually going to be using or manipulating its scripts or anything in any way. So it's all going to be the basic that we already have, and we're going to kind of build around it. So we don't have that happen again. Okay. So I've got that imported now, so I'm going to go to my standard assets, characters, first-person character, prefabs, and I'm just going to bring in a first-person controller. There it is. Looks great. Fantastic. And we'll see that I can give this just a normal capsule, but in this instance, I'm going to give it that capsule person so that we have some visual stuff to it. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and come up to my models folder, grab the, I moved my scene there, grab my capsule person, drop him in the scene, and then I'm going to nest the capsule person underneath first person controller, and I'll just put it at 0, negative 0.90. That's just something I figured out makes it fit perfectly, and so now you can see there's a little bit of extra space, but for the most part it's going to be good. Matches right to it there. So we have our capsule person there, and so that looks pretty good. So the next thing we need for the capsule person is we need the gun. And so I have my candy cane here. I'm just going to bring that into the scene. So there's the candy cane. And while the first person controller here, that's the body that moves forward, backward, left and right, strafes left and right. The first person character, that's the camera. That's what's actually looking around. All right. And so I'm going to go ahead and just drop my candy cane onto that first person character. Right. So as my camera looks around, the candy cane is going to move with it. And now I'm going to center that candy cane up. Right like that, and now I'm just going to go ahead and rotate it to get it into position. Also, just so you know, in case you weren't aware of this, if you hold down Control while rotating, you just snap by 15-degree increments, which makes it nice and easy to line up. And so I have my candy cane positioned right there, and I could sit here and fiddle around with exactly where I wanted it to go. I have recorded some numbers that I know I like, so I like 0.5 and then negative 0.6, then 0.05. I just feel that works well. And so that's what I like. So now we've got our candy cane in place, and this was really last time we did this. This was like the first time we hit a real like head scratching moment for first person shooters, right? Because the problem we had was that the gun clips into the wall, as you can see there, and so the effect is as you walked up to a wall, your gun would be clipped. And what we did last year is we used two cameras, one camera that would see only the gun, and that was drawn on top, and then a second camera that would render everything else. And the effect it had was that the gun always appeared on top. And we can certainly do that. That certainly works. There's nothing wrong with that. However, I wanted to show you a different way this year, right? So I want to show you something a little bit different. And so what I did is I have here a shader. And so I went ahead and I downloaded from our website. You can download them there. The shaders that are all included in Unity. And so this is the standard shader. And all I did is, so I took the standard shader here, and let me zoom in, and I named it a custom standard on top. And without really changing anything, all I did is I said, hey, you know what? This shader, treat this shader as an overlay. All right, so I queued it as overlay. All right, and I said z-test always. All right, which basically says just put this thing on top of everything else. If you don't really understand shaders, it's not a big deal. I am going to provide this, you know, when I post the video, so don't really worry about it. But just basically saying that, hey, this is going to make it appear on top of stuff that your rendering queue, and then whether or not you're going to be z-testing. So with this shader now, I can actually make the gun appear on top of everything else without utilizing two cameras. So without, adding extra batches or draw calls or any other camera overhead like that. So to use this, I'm going to go to my models folder, and inside here's materials, and there's my candy cane. And I'm just going to hit Control D to duplicate that, and I will have candy cane on top, like that. And I will change the shader to be this custom standard on top. And now I'm just going to click and drag that onto my candy cane, and I'll see now that my candy cane pops on top there. And if I try to clip it into a wall now, it doesn't clip. It's always being drawn on top. Now, while that looks weird to us right here, right, just remember that this is going to be your view, and you're not going to notice that problem. All right? So, yeah, so that way we don't have that clipping. Someone in chat said, is giving the gun a collider not an easy solution? No, that certainly works. The problem with giving the gun a collider, and it may or may not be a problem depending on your design, is that you're going to hit with the gun out here. Not only that, but if the gun has a collider, and let's say you are trying to enter this room slightly to the side, where you're like, hey, I should just be able to walk right in this room. But no, the collider in your gun's going to be hitting the wall. Not to mention if you try to turn and you're hitting the corner of a door because you have basically this oblong collider out there, it's going to make movement weird. It's going to make, you're going to get caught on stuff. It's going to make things pretty weird. Someone else asked, won't this be bad multiplayer? Won't it look weird to other players? Don't worry. I have thought of this. I'll show you what we're going to do. We're going to make this work. Okay. Anyway, this is the way I wanted to show you, so you don't have to use two cameras. You can just use this shader here. Someone said, can I have the shader? Yes, this is all going to be posted. Yeah. Anyway. Okay, so now we have the gun. The gun is appearing on top, and we've fixed our clipping issue into the walls and stuff like that. And so now the last thing I'm going to do kind of for this part here is I'm going to add the reticule. And again, last year we did animations for the gun with a reticule on top of the gun, so when you held down right trigger or right mouse button, it would go into an aiming mode and you could aim that way. If you're interested in that, again, feel free to check out the video from last year. It's all still relevant, but for the sake of time, we're just going to do the reticule in a slightly different way. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a canvas to my scene. So I'm going to go to Create UI Canvas, and that's going to add a UI system to my game. And on my canvas, I'm just going to right click it and go to UI Image, and I'm going to rename that image Reticule, and I'm going to spell it correctly. There we go, instead of mistyping there. And so I'm going to go ahead and just zoom out to my canvas here, and I can see my reticule is right there in the center. Right, that's my reticule. You can see the effect it's having in our game view down there. I'm just going to snap it right to the center, and I don't want this giant white block here, so I'm going to make it 8 pixels by 8 pixels, and I have a reticule sprite already. The reticule sprite is simply a red circle that is a sprite, so there's nothing really spectacular there. And so now what we have here is we have this red dot that's going to appear in the middle of our screen, and then we have a nice little reticule there. So now I'll leave 2D mode, I'll come back into my world. There we go. And so now if I hit play, I'm going to look around, I see the reticule. It's a trick, right? Because it looks like the gun is aiming, but really that reticule never moves. That reticule is right in the center of the screen always, right? And my gun doesn't clip into walls, right? And things are looking pretty good there. I have a couple audio listeners it's warning me about. We're going to fix all that. Now also, one more thing as I'm looking at it, you'll notice that the sky is this kind of different color than this sort of fog. So I do want to fix that. So I'm going to go to my first person character, to the camera on that, and I'm going to change this color. All right, and I have to look up what that color is. Sorry about that. Here it is. Okay, so the color on that is 36, 44, 105. There we go. And so now the sky just sort of matches the fog there, and it's a bit more seamless. Cool. All right. So there we go. So far so good. We've got our character, we've got the gun, it's pretty straightforward. I'm just reading chat here real quick here. Questions about the shading and stuff like that. You can make multiple shaders that work different ways. You can have one gun with more than one shader that all do this method, or you can use cameras, or I'm not suggesting necessarily one is always better than the other. I'm just showing an alternate way to do it. So just be aware of that. Okay. All right. So our gun is set up. All right, and we have our reticule and all that. So let's go ahead and we're going to get our shooting going. And again, this is going to be very similar to the stuff that we did last year. So I am going to sort of move a little quickly, or more quickly, but still we'll talk about what all this stuff is doing. And I'll just kind of move this guy back a bit. And so I'm going to go ahead to my prefabs folder, and I have two prefabs. So this year, the guns are not going to have like muzzle flashes. Instead, they're going to shoot confetti. And so we can see that's going to be the effect that comes out of the gun when you fire. And then we also have this impact effect that's also confetti that's just going to sort of throw confetti around, lets you know where you hit. One of the reasons I really wanted to do it this way is because we now have 3D rotations on particles as of 5.3. So if you're not using 5.3, you obviously won't be able to do this. But all I have here is that these just confetti just sort of spin and rotate in 3D. Just to kind of go through the modules real quick in case you're curious how I did this. Here's the particle system. That's our general module. I'm going to go quickly because when you watch the video you can always just pause. That's my emission, 100 particles at a time. Velocity over lifetime is between 1 and -1 there. And then color over lifetime, rotation over lifetime, that's our 3D rotation. And then finally, renderer, I am just using confetti, which is a like white rectangular particle. So I don't really want to get into the particle system all that much, but in case you're watching the video later, you can pause on each one of those screens if you want to know how I did that. And so I have this confetti prefab here, this blast, and I'm just going to rotate it so the z-axis is pointing forward. So when it shoots confetti out. So there we go. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to nest this on the tip of the gun there. So I'll just bring it to 0, 0, 0, and again I can sit here and try to move it around until it's where I kind of want it to be, but I don't really necessarily need to do that. Instead I just already kind of know what I want to do here. So I know that I'm going to go ahead and give this a position of approximately 0.27, -1.2, 0.01, and that's going to position it pretty much right there in the center of the gun. Yeah, so it's going to shoot the confetti outward. It's got a weird rotation to it all of a sudden. Oh well. Okay, cool. And so we're just putting the confetti blast on the end there. So the gun's also going to make a sound when we shoot. And so I'm going to add an audio source. So audio source. And the audio clip for this is going to be that first audio clip website I showed you there, the noisemaker. There we go. I'm going to turn off play on awake. We don't want it to make a sound when we first start it up. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and create a shooting script. And so my shooting script actually is already exists. And I'm going to open up, we're going to go line by line through it. Again, because the shooting stuff isn't all that different from part 1 of last year. So I'm going to start with this and then I'm going to build off of this. And again, I'm going to provide all these scripts. Yeah. So here we have our shooting script. And we're going to say, hey, what's the particle system? What's our muzzle flash so we can shoot confetti every time we fire? What's our audio? And then, hey, what's our impact prefab? We're going to create an instance of one when we load up. And then what's the camera? What am I looking at? And here we say, okay, so here's the impact effect that we're going to create from the prefab. The reason is I don't want every time I shoot to create a whole new muzzle flash and then have it sort of destroy itself, because that's a lot of instantiation and destroying. That's a lot of memory getting thrown around. I don't really want to mess with that. So instead, I'm just going to instantiate one right when the player starts up, and that player is going to have its one particle effect or its impact effect, and it's just going to move it around as it shoots, and you'll never know the difference. So in the start there, we go ahead and we just instantiate one impact effect that we're going to carry around with us. Another cool thing about this is that if you had a multiplayer game with, say, 20 people in it, there's still only one impact effect. Only you are going to have one. And I'll show you how we do that. Inside update, we're going to see if we fire. All right. And so basically when that's our left mouse or left control or whatever. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop my muzzle flash, my particle system, and then play it again. Just going to shoot it again. Stop my audio and start it again. And then I'm going to say, hey, let's find a ray. Let's find a position for our ray. Normally I put that right here inside this if statement, but it was a long statement, so I decided to break it up. So we start our raycast, right? Our imaginary line, our pointing outward to shoot somebody. All right, we start that at the camera's position. All right, and then we add to that position 1 times camera transform forward. So the reason is this, is if we look at the camera, right, that's what we're going to be shooting from, right here, kind of off the top of the head. That's what we're looking at. The problem is if we do it right here, we're going to be shooting ourselves in the head because the camera is inside our own collider. And so we're going to be shooting ourselves. And so instead, we're going to start about 1 unit in front of our character. That's that 1 times transformed out forward. So not here, but just here. So when we're shooting outside of our collider. That's why we do that. So then we say, okay, if physics.raycast with our position, which is right in front of our camera, and then the ray is going to go forward from the camera 50 units. And then we're just going to record what happens inside this raycast hit variable. So if we hit something, if this comes back true, we can say, yeah, we hit something, sweet. If we hit something, we move our impact effect to that spot, and then we play our impact effects. We know what we shot. And if the thing we hit is tagged as the player, destroy it. All right, so that's this script. It's pretty basic. And so I'll pop back to Unity. Now, normally I would put this script right here on the camera. But this time I'm not going to do that because we're going to be using networking, and we don't want to have necessarily networked components all over the place. So instead, I'm going to keep all my network-specific stuff right on top of my first-person controller, my parent, my top-level object. All right? And so on FPS controller here, which I don't want to rename, I'm going to go ahead and just drop my shooting script. And if I look down here, it's going to say, okay, what's our muzzle flash? Well, our muzzle flash is confetti blast. What's our audio? Our audio is also on confetti blast. What's our impact prefab? Well, that's confetti impact right here. And what's our camera? That's this first person character. There we go. And again, we're doing all of this so that we don't necessarily have to change the standard assets, which could change in the future and make this all not work. And so now I'm going to walk around, and I'm shooting, and I've got confetti. Oh, you probably can't hear that. Let me turn my computer audio onto the stream there, because I chose like the most annoying sound I could find. So we're going to have ourselves a party. Right? This is why I put the auto mixer in there. So there we go. Party time. There we go. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop that again. Turning off my system audio because it is probably very, very annoying. All right, so let me just check through chat here real quick. Why not create an empty object? Well, the chat's going fast. Why not create an empty object and put everything on the tip and use that to fire from? The reason is because I want to keep everything on this parent object that is going to have networking code in it. And so I don't want to have other objects, empty objects. I want everything that's going to have networking code here inside FPS controller. Let's see. Okay. Okay, that seems to be, everyone else is just sort of explaining different various things, so that seems to be about the right thing. Okay, so, all right, so we've got that. We have our sound there. It's super loud, annoying. It's a lot of fun. And so the next thing I'm going to do here is I am going to go ahead and rename this FPS controller here. I'm just going to call this player. All right, it's going to make it a little bit easier so we're not just seeing FPS controller. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this into a prefab. I'm just going to click and drag it down there. So my player is now a prefab. I'm going to have other audio in my scene, so I am going to go ahead to create, and I'm going to create a new empty game object, and I'm just going to call this BGM, which is short for background music. And this is going to be the jingle bells and stuff. I figure we might as well just get all our audio out of the way right now. And so with BGM on there, I'm going to add to it, add component audio source. And the audio clip for that is going to be Jingle Bells. That's the other thing, the website I showed you. That one is going to play on awake and is going to loop. Now, since I want to be able to balance this audio out a bit on the fly, I'm going to change the output of this audio source here. I'm going to change it to this audio mixer that I created and showed you. And so the Jingle Bells is going to link to the background, all right, audio channel, or audio group. And this Confetti Blast is going to go to the Gunshots one. All right, and so now it's all controllable through here. So I'll hit play, we hear our music, and we can see them there, and if I really wanted to, I can adjust my volume, right, so on and so forth. Okay. And to prevent this from getting stupidly annoying, I have a script right here called Sound Controller. I'll just drop it on there. What Sound Controller basically does is it says if you hit the 1 key on your keyboard, just mute the music. The 2 key makes it quiet. The 3 key makes it full volume. It's just a simple little script so that in builds and stuff we can quickly mute our music or just quiet it if we really want to. And it's going to say, all right, what's our mixer? And I'm just going to drag our mixer onto there. So there we go. Again, these are non-crucial steps and they have really nothing to do with networking, but they're just part of the setup, so I figured I'd show them. So there you go. And now I'm just going to click mute audio, so I don't have this problem anymore. All right. That is pretty much all of our shooting stuff. All right, I'm going to hit apply on there. So our shooter is ready. All right. Actually, no, it's not. I'm sorry. One more thing I forgot. Player needs to be tagged as the player because that's what we're using to kill it. So player tagged as the player, and then I'm going to apply that. I almost forgot that, and then later I'd have been like, why am I not able to shoot anything? So player has to be tagged as the player. The shooting script specifically looks for that. Okay, so my shooter is now set up. I am now ready to begin networking. All right, so this is all kind of the new stuff here. And like I said before, last time I used Photon because we didn't really have this UNet stuff now, but we do now. So this is what we're going to use. We're going to use this new Unity networking. It's actually not called UNet. I've only said that because it's in the chat room. It's just called Unity networking. But yeah, but just throwing that out there. Okay, so we are going to basically create a network manager that's going to control when and how players spawn, how they connect, and you're going to see it's actually really, really simple. Last year it required quite a bit of code, not a lot. Photon made it pretty easy, but it could have been simpler, and we're going to see that now. We're going to see that most of our work is done through components, and it becomes very, very straightforward. And so let's take a look at exactly what we're going to do. Now, we don't really want a player in our scene because we don't really want everyone having this extra object in their scene. So since player is a prefab, I turned it into a prefab, I'm going to delete it from my scene. The server is going to control putting the player in the scene. All right, and that's going to make it pretty straightforward for us. We don't even have to spawn ourselves, right? It gets pretty cool. And so I've deleted that there, and so now I'm going to create a new object. So I'm going to go create empty. I'm just going to call this network manager. There we go, network manager. And I'm going to add a component to this. So I'm going to go add component, network manager. And so this is really pretty much everything that was required to make a multiplayer game. And so here we can see things like don't destroy on load, says the network manager persists through scene loads. Run in the background is useful if you want your networking to stay alive, say on like an Android app when it's minimized. In case it's continuing downloading or doing whatever, you can let it run in the background. There are some specific rules and regulations involving that, so just be aware that you're not doing something dumb with that. And some of the other things that's in here is you could check out like what's your different local networking stuff. We're gonna look at the spawn info lit in a second here, but we can also do like we can simulate network latency, so we can actually intentionally slow our projects down to see what they do. And we can do advanced configurations and stuff like that. So a lot of really cool stuff in here. Yeah, and like here's where you modify your max connections and things like that. So I'll leave that at 4 for now. And so we now have a networked game. If I go ahead and hit play, it's not going to work because I'm going to get a message here. Well, actually, there's one more thing I'm going to need. So I'm going to hit play, and nothing's really going to happen. It becomes a network game, but that's about it. If we wanted to, this is the point where we would write maybe some scripting or something like that that says, okay, hey, network, start up or whatever. But if I really want to just jumpstart, if I really just want to start with an out-of-the-box solution to making these games, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Add Component, Network, and then Network Manager HUD. And so this is going to give me a lot of the button controls. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit play. And so this is why I was like, wait, this isn't going to work. I forgot the HUD. The HUD's the one that gives me all these buttons. So the out-of-the-box one right here, this is our old immediate UI. It's not something you want to use in production, but it's great to get you up and running because each of these buttons are linked to code, and you could just replace what they're visualized with. Also, if you're really interested in getting started with something that looks a little bit better out of the box, if you go to our asset store, we do have this network game lobby that is basically fully visualized network and lobby manager right out of the box. So If you want to write your own, roll your own, you can just sort of use this the Network Manager HUD as sort of a bare bones solution to sort of roll your own on top of it, or you can use something like the beta assets on the asset store, which are going to kind of get you up and running with something that looks fairly good. Yeah, but anyway, so if I hit play, now that I have that Network Manager HUD, I can see that I can host a game, I can be a client, I can be a dedicated server, and I can also enable this, one of our servers, our multiplayer server called Matchmaker. Now, I'm going to go ahead and hit LAN host, and I'm going to have a message here. It says the player prefab is empty on the network managers. Please set up a player prefab. So when I hit host, it tries to spawn me into the game, but it doesn't know what I am. It doesn't know what the player is. What is it going to spawn? And so I'm going to go to Network Manager, and I'm going to expand spawn here, and it says, okay, what is the player? It's going to handle spawning the players for us, right? Because we can check auto create player, but it needs to know what that player is. So I'm going to go to my prefabs, and I'm going to try to drag player on here, and I'm going to get another message. Drop it on here, and I get another message that says Network Manager player prefab must have a network identity. And so this is the kind of the two pieces that are important for networking. We have a manager that's going to keep everything sort of in sync, that's going to manage all of our preferences and all of our options. And then we have the network identity, things that exist on the network. They're not local, they're on the network. And so on my player, I'm going to select my player prefab, and I'm just going to click Add Component, Network, and then Network Identity. Now there's nothing really I do with network identity. This basically says, hey, this has access to networking stuff. This exists on the network. And since this is the player, and I'm playing, I'm doing stuff, and I want that to be synced to the server, I'm going to say that my player is a local authority. All right? So I'm going to tell the server what I'm doing. The server is not going to tell me what I'm doing. I'm the local authority for my player. All right? And so now I'm going to go to my Network Manager, and I'm just going to drop my player on there, right there. And now I'm going to go ahead and hit play, and I'm going to hit host, and here I am. I'm in a network game. So if anyone else were to hop on right now, and obviously this is currently local, we'll deal with you know, on the internet multiplayer, and were to join as a client, they would hop into the game, and there'd be two of us. All right, so our game is networked, right? And then if someone said this is also cross-platform, it is. So you can play across all the different platforms together. Pretty simple. Yeah, let me just check chat here real quick. Cool. All right. Yep. All right. So no questions, just some comments and stuff. So cool. All right. So we now have our player in there, and that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and do my very first build. So just going to Control B to open the builds. I'm going to add my current scene to my scenes and build, and I'm going to hit build and run. It's going to say, where do you want to save this? I'll just drop this on the desktop. I'll call it Merry Fragmas 2.0. And save that. Oh, I have a folder named that, so that's not going to work. So I'll just do Merry Fragmas.exe, save. All right, so this is going to build. I crashed your Google. Someone said I crashed their Chrome twice. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do it. I'll try not to do it again. Maybe I will. Maybe I've been paid to assassinate Chromes on the interwebs. Still building the player. The first time takes a little bit longer. Sorry. There we go. Okay, and so here I'm just going to play it windowed. So here's one instance of my game. I'll just drag that off to the side. And then I'm going to play it here in the server. Yeah, make sure I'm not sharing audio there. Okay, so I'm going to host a game here. So this is me hosting. I'm the server here. And now let me go ahead and grab the built version. And I'm going to go ahead and say client. And here we go. Now we got two. So something kind of interesting is happening now. This kind of seems like it's working, but it kind of isn't working. So if I look here, I'm going to see that I have two confetti impacts. I have two players. I have two people in this game, right? And if I look at them, there's one and there's the other. However, if I start running around, I'm going to see some weird stuff. I can't look up and down, but when I try to look up and down, look at the other player's candy cane, right? So something is not quite right here. Something is sort of weird and wrong, and when I shoot, they both shoot, and I'm not quite seeing exactly what I want. And if I look on the client, they're seeing something completely different, right? They're seeing odd things, and yeah, it's weird. Something is wrong. And let me explain what's going on here. So this is kind of the first mental hurdle that everyone has to sort of overcome when they deal with multiplayer. All right, we have an issue where there are two players in the scene. All right, and I can simulate that. Let me just drop two players in right now. All right, two players in the scene. The problem is that they both have a camera, and they both have a first-person control, and they both, now I'm going to have three because I hit host, but now you can see I've got three of us, and when I move, we all move because we are all players. We all have those scripts, so all of us are noticing when I'm moving and when I'm aiming and when I'm shooting. And since they all have cameras, I don't really know whose eyes I'm looking through, right? What am I looking at? Maybe I'm player, but I'm seeing out of the eyes of player one, and so on and so forth. So we need to make sure that every instance of this game only has one, what I like to call smart player. And so I have this little diagram here, because I like diagrams. And we'll see that if we have many people playing this game, they are all going to have a copy of the exact same players, right? So this client, and then this client, and then this client. Each client represents a computer or a tablet or whatever. Each one's going to have a player 1, and each one's going to have a player 2, and each one's going to have a player 3. But the smiley face, because I like smiley faces, and for whatever reason Google Drawings didn't have stars, the smiley face, right, represents which one is the actual local player. So player 1 is the guy or girl sitting at this computer. They are the local player, and these two are just dumb players. They're not local. They're from someone else, right? They're not real, all right? And then on this computer, this is this guy or girl. Then players 1 and 3 are not real, and so on and so forth, right? So I only really want one player per client to have a camera, to have a shooting script, to have all of these things. And I want that one player to say, hey server, this is what I'm doing, all right? And I can even draw arrows. Hey player is going to say, hey server, this is what I'm doing. And the server can then say, oh hey everyone, that's what player 1 is doing. Be sure to have player 1 doing that. And then the clients are like, okay, player 1, do those things, right? And so that's effectively what we want to set up, is a system like that, akin to that, okay? And so that's what we're effectively going to do here, is we're going to create a system that manages that. And it's actually not that hard to do. And so someone just posted a picture of a girl that said, hey server. Sorry. I shouldn't laugh. Okay, so here's what we're going to do, is we're going to make it effectively work in a way that all players are what we would call like dumb players. They're not real. They're visual. They look like a player, but they don't have any of the scripts, any of the functional parts. And then the one local player is going to like turn all those things on and be like, me, I'm the real one, and these are all not the real one. And it's really kind of quite easy to do that. So I'm gonna bring my player back into the scene just so I can make a bunch of changes here. And so I'm gonna turn off the first person controller. All right, because my dumb player, right, my not local player, shouldn't have that. Shouldn't be able to move around, shouldn't be able to look around, do any of those things. All right, my local player also should not be able to shoot. All right, because again, or my non-local player, my dumb players should not be able to shoot. All right, because they're just representations of other players, ghosts of other players. They're not real here locally, so they should not be able to shoot. I'm going to go into my first-person character. They also should not have cameras nor audio listeners, all right? Because they're not seeing anything. They're not here, and I don't want to have the audio listener errors, all right? And then finally, I'm going to go ahead and go to my candy cane. And as someone pointed out earlier, I don't want their candy cane to be rendered on top of everything else because that's going to look really weird. So for them, for your standard player, your dumb player, right? I'm going to go ahead and put the original material on it. So that it's rendered appropriately, the correct way. And this is our normal player, so to speak. All right. All of these things are turned off. They can't shoot. They can't move. All that. They don't have cameras. Any of that stuff. All right. And I'm just gonna hit apply. That's my normal player. All right. And one more thing I'm going to do for the candy cane here is I've got a script. Let me just open this up called candy cane material switcher. And all it does, it says, what's my local candy cane material? That's the one that appears on top of everything else. And then what's my non-local? That's the original one, the normal one. And then it's just going to say, I'm going to call a function called switch material. Are you the local player? If you are, you get the cool material that appears on top. And if you're not, you don't. This way we can just sort of turn it on and off. And that way we don't have to make other things aware of how the candy cane functions. And I'm just going to drop that on the candy cane there. And it's going to say, all right, what are the two materials? And then there's your not local one. And then there's your local one. On top is your local one. So there we go. And so now I'm going to go ahead and make a script that's going to control turning on all of these things for the local player, while all the non-local players continue to not have those. So I'll go to my scripts and I'm going to create a new script. And I'm just going to call this networked player script. Let's go ahead and pop this open. All right, reload that. Okay, so here's our network player script. And again, all we're going to do is we're going to have the code that's going to make this sort of work. And so I'm going to remove start and update. Don't want those. And so I'm going to start by saying using Unity engine, there we go, .networking. And this script is not a mono behavior, all right? It's a new type of behavior called a network behavior. And that's going to say that this script knows about networking, it knows about the networking stuff. And so, I mean, this kind of behaves just like a mono behavior. I can have start, I can have update, I can have all of the Unity API and stuff like that. But what I am going to do is I'm going to use a special function that happens for network stuff. All right, and I'm going to have a few references here. Now, to access the first-person character standard asset, they put these standard assets in their own special namespace. If I pop it open, you'll see that's the namespace. Unity standard assets.characters.firstperson, right? So if I want to actually use this in my network player script, I have to say public, it helps if I spell things right, public Unity standard assets dot characters dot first person controller FPS controller. I know it's a lot to say, but that's how we have to access it since it's in a different namespace. I could also say using at the top, but this does the same thing there. So there we go. That's our FPS controller. And then I'm going to say public, oh man, I can't type today, public camera. What's our camera? And that's going to be our FPS camera. There we go. And then I'm going to say public audio listener, which will be audio listener. And then public shooting script. Now I'm doing these things all as public variables. I could also use serialized variables. I could also just have the script and a wake function get component and all these things. They're all viable solutions. This is just the way I'm doing it. Candy cane material switcher, which I'll call candy material switcher. It's going to bother me if I don't capitalize that M. Okay, so these are the things that we turned off that we're going to turn back on if they are the local player. Now, there is a function that exists that says, hey, if you're the local player, run this code. And all non-local players don't run this code. And so that is public override void, there we go, on start local player. All right. So when the local player starts, do these things. And so what we're going to do is when the local player starts, we're going to say FPS controller.enabled equals true. We are going to say FPS camera dot enabled equals true. We are going to say audio listener dot enabled equals true. You guys might be sensing a pattern here. Shooting script dot enabled equals true. And then finally, candy material switcher dot switch material. We are local, so we're going to say true. All right. Now, one last thing that is going to help us here is to say, right now, all objects, local or not, are just going to be named player, right? Which is fine. But one thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to say GameObject.name. And so our local player is going to be easy to see because I'm going to say the local player is going to be named local player. That way we can look through our hierarchy real quick and say, oh, that's the local one. That's me, right? Here's all these other ones. They're not me. This is me. And so now when this code runs, right? It's going to turn on all these things we turned off. Our local player will get all this functionality. Our non-local players will not. Let me check chat here because it's going pretty quick. Let me see here. So switching materials doesn't make any sense. What happens if a local player clips to the wall? A non-local player will see that player's gun clipping to the wall, and then you know where he is and you shoot him. Well, first off, the local player is only local to this computer, so you're not local on anyone else's computer. So on anyone else's computer, you're a non-local player, and you have the old material. Now, if your gun clips through a wall, and you see that gun clipping through a wall, yeah, that's a problem, and that's certainly something you would want or have to fix. And it's kind of beyond the scope of this because that's just a traditional first-person shooter problem that you deal with. And you could just, I mean, there's a few ways you could fix that, but again, we don't have a lot of time. I'm not going to spend a lot of time dealing with the scope of things like that. So just be aware of that. As someone else said here, network does not equal internet. You are correct. Right now, it is local network. We're going to get the non-local, or yeah, local area network LAN. Pretty soon here, we're going to have internet networking. So we're going to do both. Okay. And so if you are the local player, boop, there we go. We're going to turn all this stuff on. Okay. And so let's go ahead and go back to Unity now. And if I look at my player, with all of these things turned off, I'm going to go ahead and grab this scripts folder, my networked player. I'm going to drop that onto player. And now it's going to say, okay, what is my first-person controller? Well, that's on player. What's my camera? That's on this first-person camera. What's the audio listener? There it is. Where's my shooting script? On the player. And where's my candy cane material switcher? That's on candy cane. All right. Now, that's a lot of stuff. Okay. And so if I hit play, I'll see that I'll host, and then, oh, I forgot I got to take this player out. So before I do that, let me hit play. Let me take this player out of here. There we go. Save that. And I will host. And then here I am. And so my local player gets named local player, and all this stuff is turned on. And any non-local players won't. Before I build this and show non-local players, one more thing I want to do is now I know how my player moves around. My player moves around with script, right? I hit a button, they move. That's easy. How do the other players move? How do they tell the server what they've done? The server just knows that they've spawned and that they're important. Right? But how do they know? And this is actually a good question. Someone here said, what do you use as a server? So you have a couple options. You can either set up a dedicated server, which are some of my options right here when I can say, hey, I want to create a dedicated server. But if I'm just doing ad hoc, like peer-to-peer server stuff, like you might traditionally do with a simple solution, one of your clients will be the server. No one really knows. I mean, it's whoever creates the room generally, but you could also kind of adjust it as you need to. But so someone is the server, so they're managing a server and a client, and everyone else is just managing a client. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Oh, people are still talking about the gun with colliders. Anyway, okay, so yeah, let's keep the chat reasonable, people. We got a lot of trolls. No good. All right, and so let's see here. So we know what moves our player, but what moves the other players? And that's, again, a pretty easy thing to add. So I'm going to go back to my prefabs, my player. I'll drag it into my scene here again. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add something to the player that says, hey, server, my position, my transform is important. So I'm going to tell you what it is, and you tell everybody else. And then on everyone else's computer, they're going to see that. And so I'm going to click Add Component, Network, and I'm going to do Network Transform. And so this is what's going to sync the position and rotation of this object across all clients. All right. Now, normally this is set to sync the rigid body 3D. But instead, since this is using a character controller, all right, it has a kinematic rigid body, but it's using a character controller to move, I'm going to go ahead and say, you know what, sync the character controller instead. We can also sync rigid body 2Ds, transforms, or whatever, but character controller is the thing I want to sync. To save on some of our bandwidth, we don't need to send our full rotation. We actually only need to send Y rotation because we just rotate on the Y axis. We don't really ever turn downwards, or anything else, or along the Z axis. So we can kind of save on some some bandwidth by just saying y-axis only. And so now what we have effectively is that our transforms are going to get synced across the network. We're going to see everyone move. And what's really cool about this is we can say, hey, if objects are further apart than this, like say we jump them or teleport them, just snap them, interpolate the movement, it's going to make them move nice and smoothly. This is stuff we used to have to do, like if you remember the Photon stuff, we wrote code that did this, and now they're just components, right? So let me save this on the player, let me apply that, and then delete it from my scene. And then I'm going to hit a build here, so we'll just build and run. Ooh, before I do that, cancel. Before I do that, I'm just going to mute this here, because you can't hear it, but I can, and it's annoying. I made it to be really annoying, forgetting that I'm going to have to actually work with it while we're doing this, and I'm just going to have to listen to it and be annoyed the entire time. Yeah. So I'll hit play. All right, and so now I'll hit play here, and I'm going to host. And so here we go. I'm running around. I can see my local player right here. And so now my client, I'm going to join. There we go. There's my server. Now, we move and all this. We still can't shoot yet, all right? But if I look, right, I can see the client there. It's hard to get everything to be on the screen there. So I can see now my client's moving. All right, so this is, you can't see it, but I'm playing on the other screen now. All right, so we get all this. Shooting still doesn't work. If the client shoots the server, nothing happens. On the client, it sees the server die, right? And I should really stop saying client server. Player, we'll say player 2, player 1, right? So player 2 just shot player 1. Player 2 happens to be a client instead of the server. I see player 1 die, right? But it's not dead. Here's player 1. And player 1 can shoot player 2, and I see player 2 die. But again, it's not real. On the other screen, it didn't die, right? And so we're syncing a position, we're syncing movement, and we're syncing all these things yet, but there's still no way to know when a player dies yet. And so what I really want to do is I want to go ahead and fix this. And it's not as simple as just adding a component in this case, because I need to sync the state. All right, I need to make the state of this player common across all clients, right? And so that's what I need to do. Okay, and someone said here, will the network transform sync and lerp movement smoothly? Yes, that happens automatically. You can turn it off so it doesn't lerp, but normally it does lerp there, and so you could change that. Okay, and so what we basically need to do is we basically need to set up a system of commands, right? Commands and then these things called RPCs, remote procedural calls. And so I'm going to bring my little diagram up here again. And now, so basically what we need to do is we need to understand sort of the difference between the client and the player, which is my fault a little bit because I keep saying server and client when I don't really mean that. And so we need to understand that each client is going to have, multiple players, and a server, right, could potentially have its own client, or it could be a dedicated server. We don't really know. And so what we want to do is we want to say I'm player 1. Client or server is kind of irrelevant, but say I'm player 1, and I shoot player 2. I can't just destroy player 2 locally, which is what we're doing now. In our script, we say, hey, if what we shoot is shot is tagged as player, destroy it. That doesn't work because, yeah, player 2 goes away here, but that's it, right? Player 2 still exists everywhere, right? There's a lot of player 2s. And so instead of just shooting player 2 here, all right, we need to say, hey, server, all right, server, I shot player 2, all right? Hey, server, I shot player 2. And then server is going to say, hey, all player 2s, all of you, you've been shot. All right? And then they will all die. And that's what we want. All right? So we don't want to do this locally. We want to tell the server, and the server is going to tell all of them. So this part of telling the server is going to be my really terrible mouse writing. That's my word command. You can read that. Command. When we tell the server something, that's a command. All right? And when the server tells the clients to do something to one of the players, that's an RPC, remote procedure call. All right? Yeah. And now, again, there's a couple sort of security issues here we're going to talk about. So in this instance, the way we're going to do today, player 1 is going to say, hey, server, I shot player 2. That's going to be really fast because we're doing all the physics evaluation locally. right? So it's going to reduce lag. It's going to make our games much more accurate. The downside is it's less secure because, you know, normally you want the server to do that stuff if you want a more secure environment. And so it's a trade-off. You're trading a little bit of security for a little bit of performance. Either way would certainly work. It really depends on how your scripts work and maybe how hackable some of the stuff you're doing is. Generally speaking, you're going to need to test. You're going to need to say, hey, can I afford this trade-off? Can I not? What amount of work can I do? I could have, say, locally created the start and end points of the array and sent that forward and let the server evaluate it to see if it hit something. There's a lot of ways to do this, but I went an easy route because I don't have a lot of time, and I'm just trying to go with simple stuff here. So that's effectively what we're doing there. All right? And so let me show you just kind of how that works. Someone else said, are we going to keep a game state on the server and the clients just read data? The clients can't just read data. If the clients only read data, the bandwidth, I mean, you would have so much bandwidth usage. A lot of stuff has to happen on the client with a little bit of data synced between back and forth, right? And so I need to fix this so we can shoot all these other players, all right? Now, just so we're not spawning on top of each other, which is going to make testing a little bit more difficult, I'm going to create some spawn points real quick as we go forward. And again, spawn points really simple. I'm going to click create empty here, and I'll just call it spawn point. And I am going to go to my spawn point. I'm going to add to it an icon, little circular icon there, just so, you know what, where are you? It's always fun to figure out exactly where objects popped up at. So there we go. That's a spawn point. I'll just rotate it so it's facing forward like that. And I'm going to go add component, network start position. And that's it. Now it's a spawn point. I don't really have to do anything else to it. I'll turn it into a prefab. There it is. And let's create another one, say, over here. Just like that. And we'll rotate it to face the other way. There we go. So now we have two spawn points. And if you're curious how they get spawned on, if I go back to my network manager and I look at my spawn info, I can see player start spawn method, random or round robin. And so I can just choose, what do I want to happen here? How do I want this to work? And so we have our two spawn points. And so now if I spawn in, it's set to random. I can host, I spawn there. Let me host again. I spawn over here. All right, cool. Usually it takes me 2 or 3 tries to get a different result, so everyone thinks I'm lying, but I'm not lying. I'm telling you the truth. So there we go. So we have our spawn points in. That's going to make it easier. Again, so we're not just spawning on top of each other. All right. And so we have our spawn points. So let's go ahead and look at the scripts that are actually going to make this shooting possible. And we actually already have the 2 scripts we need. It's going to be network player script and our shooting script, right? So it's going to be pretty straightforward. So I'm going to open up my shooting script first. And the first things first is now I'm using networking. So my shooting script here has to be using Unity engine.networking. All right, and for shooting script, it's not a mono behavior anymore. It's going to be a network behavior. Now that's going to keep everything working the same way, but since I need to be able to talk to a server, I need it to be a network behavior. All right, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a command. And so I'm going to come right down below update here. I'm going to create a command. And so commands, so I'm going to make this, well, I don't need to make it public. I'm just going to make it void. Commands have to start with CMD like that. They just have to. It's a requirement. So command hit player. All right. And then I'm just going to pass in a game object hit. So this is going to say, hey, I hit a player. All right. This is the player that I hit. All right. Now, besides having CMD at the beginning, a command also has to have the tag command. So this is a command. So when I call this function, it's not going to run on any clients. It's going to run on the server. And it will be the server's job to then pass it on. This may seem confusing a little bit because this code is on a script. And this script is on a player prefab on a client's machine. But just know that when I call this command, right, the server is being informed that this is being run. And the server is the thing that handles the processing on this. All right? So just be aware of that. Someone said, how about spawn points for teams 1 and 2? Do you add an array with each team? We can actually extend the network manager to do a lot of things like that. I'm actually going to show you how to extend it because I have a script we're going to do that. Why is this not considered a public method? I could, but I don't need to. This doesn't need to be called from a different script, so it doesn't need to be public. All right? And so what we're going to say is when we call this function, all right, we are going to inform all instances of whatever object was hit across all clients and say, hey, you got hit, right? You just got jacked up by a candy cane. And so I'm going to say hit.getComponent. All right. The thing I'm going to get is I'm going to get its networked. Well, I was hoping to be able to short script that. So networked player script. So we're going to say, hey, give me your network player script, and I'm going to call a function. Now this function does not exist yet. All right, I haven't written it yet. So it's going to be RPC resolve hit. And again, remember that term RPC, remote procedure call. So it's going to say, all of you guys, you're about to get hit. All right, I'm going to comment that out for now because I haven't written that yet. So how do we know when to call this function? Well, if we hit a player, let's call it. So if I hit a player, I'm just going to call cmd hit player, and I'm just going to say hit dot, I have to do hit dot transform dot game object to get that out of the raycast hit variable. So, okay, I hit a player. Hey server, I hit a player. Server's going to say, okay, all of you guys get hit. Another thing that's easy for testing is Will Goldstone's in chat, disrupting things. That'll happen. Another thing we're going to do here is we are going to say, to make things easier, to make it so we don't always have to have a client to test, right? We don't have to have two players to test to shoot each other. I'm going to add a bit of code here that I would definitely remove before actually producing this. I'm going to say if input.getButtonDown fire2. So if I hit the right mouse button, just right now while testing, I'm just going to hit myself. That way I don't need to have two players to test that getting hit works. I can effectively just shoot myself and die. All right, so I hit myself right now if I do the right mouse click. I would remove this eventually, but for now, for testing, there we go. And so this is exactly how we tell the server to do stuff. That's the first part. And the next thing we're going to do is we're now going to tell the player what to do when they are hit. All right, so I'm going to come over to the networked player script. And on here, we need to say, okay, what are we going to do? So when we're hit, we need to do a series of things. So the first thing is when I shoot someone or when I am shot, I want either myself or the thing I shot to disappear. I shoot them, they disappear. I am shot, I disappear. All right? And so that doesn't matter if I'm local or not. Whatever gets shot goes away. It becomes invisible. Right? And so I'm going to create a function called void toggle renderers bool is alive. So this is going to turn my renderers on or off. And I'm going to say renderer. This code is not good, by the way. I just writing it because it's shorter. When I post the scripts, they will be optimized appropriately. Normally, I would cache this, but for now, I'm just going to do get component and get all my renderers. And then for int I equals 0, I is less than renderers dot length I plus plus. We're just going to loop through all of these and just say renderers sub I dot enabled equals is alive. So if I pass in false, everything goes invisible. If I pass in true, everything becomes visible again. And then I should say get components, in children. That was the wrong function. There we go, get components in children. Give me all renderers on this object. We're going to turn them all on or off. Now, if I am a local player, I also want to be able to turn on my controls, because if I'm dead, right, if I've gone away, I don't want to be able to shoot people still. That would be a problem. So I'm going to say void toggle controls. Also, bool is alive. All right, and in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say FPS controller, the thing we turned on for smart players, right? That enabled equals is alive. There we go. And then I'm going to say FPS camera. I'm sorry, I'm not doing FPS camera yet. I'm going to say shooting script, because again, we don't want to be able to shoot people while we're not alive. There we go. And then finally, I don't want my camera to be able to see anything, but I don't necessarily want to turn it off either, right? Because I want to have my audio listener, and I don't want to have to, I don't want to necessarily mess with my camera, turning it on and off again. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invert its culling mask. So FPS camera.culling mask, normally it's set to everything, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set it to nothing by just inverting it, FPS camera.culling mask. So everything becomes nothing, nothing becomes everything again, right? It's an easy way to invert this. This works because I'm not using the culling mask. If I was using the culling mask, I'd come up with a different way of doing this, right? So there we go. Now, we haven't used these yet, but these are just two helper functions to turn all our renderers on and off and to turn all our controls on and off, all right? So here's that RPC that I just called, right? So if I go back over to shooting script, I named it RPC resolve hit. And so I'm just going to come over here, and I'm going to create a function called public. It needs to be public because it's called from another script. Public void RPC resolve hit. This is a remote procedure call, RPC. And just like the command, all right, it needs an attribute, and that attribute is client RPC. So this code is run on all clients for this hit player, right? It's not run on all players. It's not like if I shoot one player, all players die. All clients run this code on the same player, right? So every single client calls it on player 2, player 2, player 2, or player 3, player 3, player 3, right? That can kind of be one of those mental hurdles when people first get started, understanding that there's a difference between the client and the player, all right? And so inside here, when I shoot a player, when they get hit, right? So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to say toggle renderer. So it doesn't matter if they're local or not, they turn invisible, right? And then we're going to say, hey, is this the local player? Oops. It helps if I type that right. If local player. If is local player. So if you are the smart one, right? You're not the dummy one without any of the stuff turned on. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and come up with a new spawn point. So I'm going to say transform spawn equals network manager. Because we're going to have these spawn points where I'm going to say, hey, network manager, give me a new spawn point. So I'm going to say network manager dot singleton dot get start position. Give me a new place to go. And then I'm going to move myself to that position. So transform dot position equals spawn dot position. I'm going to do this while I'm invisible so that you don't see me move with the interpolation from the network transform, right? So while invisible, I'm going to move to my new spot. Spawn dot rotation. Okay, there we go. And then I'm going to say, also, since this is the smart one, let's turn our controls off. Okay, and so now our player loses all of his control and disappears, right? So what do we want to do? Well, we want to turn it back on at some point. And so I'm going to create a new function called void respawn. And that respawn function is simply going to toggle renderers back on. So just true there. Oops, semicolon. And then I'm going to say if is local player. So if you are the local player, then I'm also going to toggle controls. And that's it, right? So we're going to toggle our renderers back on, and if we're the smart player, we get our controls back. And I'm simply just going to now go ahead and invoke this. So I will invoke respawn, and I'll do that after, say, 2 seconds. There we go. So if I shoot a player, all right, I'm going to say, hey, server, I shot this player. And the server is going to say, okay, all instances of that player, you've been hit. And every instance of the player turns off their renderers. The local one moves its position. You wouldn't want all of them to move their position. That'd be bad, because then they would all move to different spots. So local one moves its position. It turns its controls off. And then after 2 seconds, all of them become visible again, and the local one gets its control back. All right? So there we go. So now that we have that stuff there, we are ready to try this out. So I'm going to come back to Unity. All right, and there's really no new work required for that. So if I go back to my prefabs, I haven't really changed the shooting script, and I've obviously written code, but I've not changed the things required for it. And so now I can test it out. So I'm going to start just testing it out locally. So I'm going to hit play and hit host. Remember, right mouse now makes you destroy yourself. So boop, I've destroyed myself, and 2 seconds later I spawn. And I should choose a new position there. There we go. And so I'm just respawning. All right, so there we go. And so let's see here. What is happening in chat? Come on, guys. Humanity. Okay. And I'm also going to go ahead and test this with more than one player, so I'll go ahead and build this. Play. So a question here, what in the message determines which player is hit? So if I look at this, there's no message that determines the player is hit. I hit a player, and I tell the server I hit that player. So there's no message. I'm telling it which player I hit. I pass its game object, so it knows which player it hit. Right? And then it's going to say, okay, that game object, that player, all right, it's time for you to die. But since he's calling it, she, whatever, is calling it as an RPC, all instances of that player die. All right, and so that's how we know. Okay, and so we've got that. So I've hit play. I have a second instance running, so I'll place here. I'll host it here, and then on the client, I'll join as a client. So on the client, there's my server. Boom. There we go. Player 2 shot player 1. And there it is. I'll shoot it again. Can't stop, won't stop. Oh, is it back? Boom. All right. And then let me just hop over to the other one, to the one that's hosting, and there we go. And so we can see now that we got this working. All right. So we're shooting. We're being hit. Now, unlike before, we're not, like the one from last year, we're not booting people back out to a lobby or anything like that. Just 2 seconds later, they pop back in and they can keep playing, right? And so we just keep it nice and simple there. Now, some people had asked about the network manager, about teams and things like that. We can overwrite this network manager. I can see right here, script is the bottom property there. And that's what I'm going to do. I actually have a script written for this because you'll notice that while I'm in the menu, right, I have a reticule. Well, I don't really want a reticule there. And while I'm playing, my camera's still active. My main camera up here is still active. I don't really want that camera active when I'm not using it, right? So I have a script that's going to help with that. So I'll go to my scripts, and I have a custom network manager. And I can see in here it's going to say, okay, what's our scene camera? What's our canvas? And we got some function calls. So on start client, on start host, on stop client, on stop host. So when we start our client or start a host, we hide our camera and we show our reticule. When we stop, we hide our reticule and we show our camera. Oh, there's stop. So show our camera, hide our reticule. And that's all they do is if they exist, we set them to true or set them to false, right? And so this is just a simple override of the custom network manager that's going to allow us to do custom things. So on the network manager, I'm just going to grab my custom network manager, drop it right on there, and I'll see it renders the same way, right? Nothing new about that. It's going to say, okay, what's my scene camera? Well, here's my scene camera. And what's my reticule? There's my reticule. And now I'll just turn my reticule off. And now I'll see if I hit play. Here, outside of a game, I have no reticule. As soon as I join, I will see my camera gets disabled and my reticule comes back. Right? So we can override the network managers to do stuff like that. Right? That's a simple example, but we can certainly do that. Okay. And so one more thing I want to share and show before we go ahead and start playing this. I do have a build of this available that we're all going to have a chance to play. But before I do that, we obviously need to get it on the internet. Right now, it's just still a LAN game. You couldn't join my game just yet unless you happen to know my IP address and the port I have available on my firewall. And so let's go ahead and make this a multiplayer game. And then we're going to quickly look at the lobby. All right. And so setting up the networking is actually just a couple clicks. So I have obviously a local area network right now. So I'm going to go to my services tab. And with my services tab, which is also just this cloud button right here, or window services, I have the option to create a new ID. So I could select an organization. I could say my Geig, let's create a new game. And then it's going to give me an ID and I'm done. But I already have done that. So I'm just going to click, I already have a Unity project. And I will just choose my Geig. And this is my network game. And I'll just link the two. Yes. All right. 1 second here. Okay. And so now what I'm going to do, so I've got that done. I'm going to go ahead, right down here is multiplayer. I'll just click that. And the first time I do this, all I'm going to do is hit enable multiplayer. But since I've done that, now I've done it. It's all linked, right? So that's fairly simple. All I got to do is, again, I just add my ID and I click the multiplayer and I click enable and here we go. So currently we have it set up so that we can see our current concurrent users and how many are used by this project and so on and so forth. And so now I've got a multiplayer game. And so if I were to rebuild this now, and I'll just do a quick build. Make sure I've got that on there. File, build settings, build and run. Okay, give that a second. Could I briefly show or describe making an AI bot? Probably not right now. We definitely don't have time for that. Maybe in the future, or you can reach out to me offline. But yeah, nothing like that right now. And so I'm going to go ahead and hit play now that I've hit that build there. Now I'm not going to do local area stuff. I'm going to go enable matchmaker, and I'm going to say create a match, and I'll just leave this as default. I could give it a name, but whatever. I could also change what my matchmaker servers are. By default, we're just using the Unity one, but I'm just going to create that on the default one. So I'll hit create, and here we go. So now on the client, I'm going to enable matchmaker. Instead of creating, I'm just going to find an internet match. And here, this is going to list all the different matches. There's only one right now. So there's default, and so I'll just join that. All right. The screen goes screwy for a second because the first camera gets enabled and the player hasn't spawned in yet, so it's still being negotiating. So you could leave the one camera on a little bit longer if you want. Again, I was just going for simple code, right? And so now we can see that we can still shoot each other, and now this is a network game, right, on the matchmaker service, and so we no longer need to do LAN only. So at this point, we can actually all play. All right. So there we go. So someone said, how do we make variables available on the server like health? Check out sync vars, synced variables. And so, yeah, just to be aware that sync vars, again, I was just trying to make this simple, not a ton of time, so I didn't have a chance to get into all that stuff. Yeah. And so I'm going to go ahead and post a link here to the games. So let me get that into chat here. So this is a link to the built PC game, and this is a link to the Mac game. And while people are downloading that and playing around with that, I'm going to go ahead and show off the lobby real quick. And so the lobby service, again, is real simple. And it's going to come again with this very limited UI. And if you want to do a more complex UI, you can either roll one up, just using kind of the stub functions of our simple UI, or again, like I had said before, I highly encourage you to check out, and I'll post it up again in case you have forgotten about it, the network game lobby, because a lot of useful stuff in there for just getting up and going really quickly using this stuff, as opposed to making your own from scratch, which, you know, can take some time. And so if I'm going to turn this into a lobby game, what I'm going to do is I'm saving my scene here. That's all well and good. And now I'm going to delete this network manager. This scene is not going to have the networking stuff in it anymore. All right. And so I can turn my canvas back on there. I can turn this camera off. Ultimately, it's not really going to matter. But I am turning all the networking stuff off. And now I'm going to go and create a new scene. All right. And I will save this scene. And this is going to be my lobby. So scene, lobby. And so here I could have all the HUD and stuff, the UI stuff for lobbies and all that junk. But I don't really care about that stuff right now. And I'm going to go to my build settings. This is important. I'm going to add this scene to my build settings. If I don't do that, this step will not work. You'll get an error message. All right. So my lobby scene is now part of my build settings. And here is where I'm going to do my new network stuff. All right. So I'm going to create my network manager here. And I'm going to go add component network. Now, instead of a network manager, I'm going to add a network lobby manager. All right, so it's going to have a lot of the same stuff. All our spawn stuff there. It's going to have, you know, our advanced configurations, latency, all this stuff here, how many players can play. But what's interesting is it's going to say, okay, what's our lobby scene and what's our play scene? So I'll go to my scenes. My lobby is my lobby scene, and main is my play scene. It's going to say, what's my game player? Okay, I'll go to my prefabs. I have my game player there. But it also wants to know, what's my lobby player? All right, well, I don't really have a lobby player yet. If I wanted my lobby players to be able to do stuff while they're waiting for games, I could create something complex as a player within the lobby. Since I'm not really super interested in doing all that, I'm just going to create an empty, which I'm going to call lobby player. And I'm just going to give this the component, add component, network lobby player. All right, and I'm just going to leave this kind of like that, right? Nothing spectacular. I'll turn it into a prefab, delete it from my scene, and on my network manager, I'll say, this is my lobby player. All right, at this point, I have a lobby. It's up and running, our lobby system. I'll hit play. Oh, I forgot the HUD again. Always forget the HUD. Add component, network, and then network manager HUD. All right, so I'll hit play, and I can see, all right, if I hit LAN host now, it's going to put me in a lobby. And I have the ability to add local players. Other people can queue up, and then they can say when they're ready. If I hit start, if I ready up, then once everyone's readied up, we're into the game. All right. So the stuff is pretty simple there. Someone just asked in chat, who's the host? Oh, so we're talking about the multiplayer game. Yeah, let me hop into that. Now that you've seen the lobby and stuff, let me pop in. We'll be able to see it. Hopefully there's going to be some people running around playing at this point. Again, released Mac and PC, so yeah, so it'd be available for a broader audience. So let me find a room. So we got a default going. I'll join that. And there we go. And so hopefully there's other folks in here. Obviously there's one other person in here, because if the host leaves, then we leave. Waiting to see creepy capsule people floating around. Anyway, so currently I have this particular build is capped out to 8 folks. I don't know how many people have downloaded. Oh, there's one person. Oh, nice try. Nice try. I made this game. Get on my level. That's right. Anyway, I guess the secret's out. I'm a bit of a trash talker, sorry. I gotta stop playing this before I do something mean. Oh, get back here. Get back here. Taste my confetti. Yeah. Jumping. It's hard to aim when you jump. Okay, anyway, alright. I'm gonna stop this now before I just keep embarrassing myself. So anyway, so there we go. Basically, yeah, I mean, this is kind of our networking, the Unity networking in a nutshell, and it is, again, really simple. Yeah, I mean, there are some scripting, you get really low level, really kind of complex with it, but you can also just utilize a lot of our built-in components and stuff to make things really easy, right? You want to sync positions and stuff. We have a network transform, right? We have these network identities, which allow you to be local authorities and things like that. If we wanted to spawn new things that weren't necessarily players, all I need to do is just go into the spawn info and add other spawnable things, spawnable prefabs to create. And so the whole thing, you know, is pretty simple. There is a lot more that you can do. So don't think that this is like it. There's so much you can do with the networking stuff, but I really wanted everyone to sort of feel comfortable with, you know, with some of the basics, some of the ideas, because it can be a little confusing to think of the difference between server and client and then players, because they're all kind of different things, though they might seem to be fairly similar. And so I'm going to go ahead and throw this up here real quick, our Twitter stuff, and I'm going to go ahead and read through chat and see what else is going on in chat. Any questions? So this is live but not interactive. Well, it's sort of interactive because we play. Let's see. Oh, people need the links reposted. So again, that's the Mac version. And that's the PC version. Okay, and let's see, still waiting on a connection. So be aware, oh, this is important, I should have mentioned this. If you are on the European servers, you're only going to see European games. If you're on American servers, you're only going to see American games. Asian servers, Asian games. So you may not all be seeing the same thing, depending on where you're at. So just be aware of that. So that threw me for a loop earlier this morning when I was trying to test with some of our folks. Will, actually, in chat here. And we weren't able to see each other's games. And it was like, oh yeah, right, we're on internet servers now, and those are localized to region. So yeah, be aware of that. Let's see. Let's see. I know the spawn points. I'm a cheater. Yeah, that's true. That is true. I do know what the spawn points are. How would you password protect a game? You mean like with a login portal? That would certainly be UI based. That would reach out to some authentication server, receive some data back, a handshake, whatever, that would then allow you to join the game. It's a little bit more complex than simply just answering in chat. Let's see. Oh yeah, that's great. Will mentioned something that I had forgotten to do that I had totally meant to do. By the way, if you think the jumping was too high and stuff like that, you can certainly just change the first-person controller to not be like that. But thanks, Will. Tanks. Tanks, which was our Unite 2015 training day material, has a bunch of resources on the internet as far as learning how it was put together, all these videos on our website. Also has a networked version with full UI and everything. It looks great. Definitely check it out. I thought there were more screenshots of it, but yeah. So definitely check out the networked tanks game, because you'll really get a chance to see how this stuff all comes together. Let's see. application where we have a non-Unity application where one player needs to be able to sync a large object, the context of a text file or image, with others. We're hitting the max size for sync var. How can we make this work? You could break it up into several variables that are then reconstituted on the other side, right? That's kind of like the entire idea behind the internet: modulate, demodulate. That would work. You may also just want to think, do I really need to send this much data? Why am I sending this much data? There's a lot that goes into that, but basically you can either reduce your data or find more efficient ways to transmit it. Let's see here. Oh yeah, Will posted in chat the networked tanks link to the asset store. Thank you, Will. Can you make a whack-a-mole game? Would be good for a beginner like me. If you're a beginner, definitely check out our rollerball tutorials on our website. Actually, you know what? I keep mentioning the website. While I'm at it, let me just go unity3d.com/learn. And let's see. So here's the learn section of the website where we have all of our tutorials, right? Tons of awesome stuff in here. Where's the full project ones? Oh, here's the text tutorials I was talking about. Survival shooters. Rollerball is great for beginners. So if you're a beginner, definitely check this out. There's a lot of really awesome stuff on here. Oh, you know what? I'm an idiot. I've been showing you all of this stuff, and I still have this screen open. Okay, I'm sorry. So let me do this again. Tanks. Networking demo. Why didn't anyone say anything in chat that you couldn't see what I was doing? So tanks demo here in the asset store. I'm an idiot. So here we go. So tanks demo here in the asset store. You can see we have the Unite Training Day tanks, which is right here. All right, and then we have the multiplayer version. Definitely worth checking out. Also, this is our Learn site, so unity3d.com/learn. And you can see all of our tutorials and stuff like that. And like there's our tanks tutorials, 2D roguelites, rollerball. So if you knew, rollerball is great. Yeah, I guess that's right. Everyone's playing the game, so no one's actually watching the stream anymore. So there we go. Is it possible to override the regions or some kind of way for friends to play together if they're on different regions? Well, I suppose it's just the settings of the server, right? Our servers happen to be localized, but I would imagine it's possible to have servers that aren't, and then you can all play together. You can, because you can see you could change what the matchmaking server is to be your own if you'd like. Let's see. So what you can do, yeah. So as far as using your own server goes, if I hit play here and I enable matchmaker, you'll see that here's the default server I'm using. You can also change this to be your own server. So if you have your own matchmaking server, just you're welcome to use that, right? So ours just points to the Unity one by default. Let's see here. Any update on when documentation to accompany this project is coming? The documentation's there. It's all live on our website. All about the network transforms, network managers, all that stuff. There's a lot of really good documentation, actually. Really good. Let's see here. Let's see. Any updates with the... Okay, that's the same question again. Let's see. Networking books for Unity? Probably not, since it's brand new. I'd give it some time. Let's see. How to manage objects we could be told to everyone. I already sort of mentioned that. You just spawned it on the server. Let's see. So that's very basic by now, but does this handle lag or latency already? A little bit. Obviously, you handle lag and latency through interpolation of data, which the network transform already does. But a lot of times, depending on what is experiencing lag, what you're doing with the data that is lagging, you may want to use the latency simulator to see how your game reacts. See how the game reacts, and then modify it and provide your own interpolation algorithms depending on how you want things to smooth or change or whatever. Let's see. How to use your own matchmaker. I already said how to do that. Can you briefly outline a dumb chase bot? I already answered that. No. Just beyond the content scope of this, so feel free to ping me offline. What is the max CC user? I think it depends on the setups of your server, and I think the free version caps out at 8 concurrent users per lot. I don't know. I'm not even going to try to guess. Basically, if you go to multiplayer and you just click to go to dashboard, that'll pop up the dashboard here, and then let me wait for the site to load, and then you could set up your server with all that data. So you can see like IDs, edit configurations, 100 across all of your games for the free version right now. Total CC used by all my projects, max allowed by room. So again, you can see all that stuff here. And there are different pricing tiers if you need more users and more configuration ability and things like that. So I think it varies pretty greatly. Thanks, but actually the game can become out of sync because the server has authority. The server has authority, sort of. The server has authority on all the dumb players, but if you recall, the local player, if I look at its network identity, the local player has authority, so the game won't become out of sync. The local player is always telling the server where it's at, and then the server is just letting everyone else know. So coming out of sync isn't an issue here. Let's see. When you create an internet room that is hosted locally, or is that hosted on the Unity matchmaking server? The matchmaking server allows you to hook into other players, but the actual server is whoever's hosting by default. So, but did disabling the X and Z network sync of the players, did we lose the ability to see where they're aiming up and down? No, it seems like you would, but here let me explain why, because we never actually had it. And so let me pop open the prefab here. So if we look at this, the player has the network transform. So that means that we are syncing right now any Y rotation, and if I set this to full 3D, we'd also sync any X rotation or Z rotation, right? But that is not to say that this gets synced, because it doesn't, right? This is our camera. That's the thing that when this moves up and down, so does the gun. All right, that was never synced, and so we never had that in order to lose it, right? And so if we wanted to, we could use a sync var to make sure that the angle that this is looking gets synced across, or whatever. But since those things had to happen on the parent, right, the network identity goes on the top level, we never synced those to begin with. Let's see. So as for my previous question, if a player hosts a local game, a local area network game, and another region player joins that game if the host has opened the port, yeah, I'd imagine that would work quite fine. Let's see. Oh, right, and so again, as Will's talking in chat, there is more networking content coming up. Micro machine style racing clone that looks pretty cool. Let's see here. Let's see. I would prefer syncing the rigid body velocity over syncing the transform directly. You can, actually. So if you look at the transform, right, we can actually just sync the rigid body if we want instead, which will sync velocities and things like that. In this instance, we're just using the character controller, though. All right, I'm going to answer, I think, one more question because we're getting a lot of repeats now, and then we're going to sort of wrap it up because it has been a longer video. So, hey, I'm making a multiplayer game in Unity with Unity networking. It's current preview, so I'm getting worried about the pricing change in the future. Should I continue using it? It depends on how many concurrent users you think you're going to need, and I actually don't know the pricing model. You just go to our website. It's on there, and you'll have to check that out. I'm certain it's pretty competitive, but off the top of my head, I honestly don't even know what it is. So someone else said, with charging for multiplayer services, what is going to be charged and what's going to be free? Obviously, the service is free. It's just how many concurrent users you can have on the Matchmaker service. That's based on pricing tier. And again, I don't know it off the top of my head. So yeah, but just go on the website for the matchmaking service, and I'm sure the tiers are all listed right there. What are the multiplayer services? The multiplayer services are those non-local area network games that you saw me set up with just a couple clicks of a button, right? Where the players are mapped by region to each other and creating rooms and stuff like that. That's our multiplayer service. Okay. Do I need a new player one prefab without the network components if it is a single player mode? I wouldn't say you need a whole new prefab. I would basically just have inside the code. I would just have an environment variable. If this is local, don't have this network player script or don't have this shooting script, right? Or just I would just write some code that, based on how it's built, turns those things on and off. Let's see here. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up the thing now, the video now, and I'll hang out and chat a little bit longer if there are more questions. There's a few repeats, a few new ones that are maybe a little bit more complex. So yeah, I'll wrap up here and then I'll stick around and answer those. So again, thank you everyone for watching Merry Fragmas. Wanted to share the image with you one more time there. Appreciate you sticking with me. I know this is quite a bit longer than what we normally do. Hopefully that helped. Hopefully that made some sense. I know it can get a little confusing when you get into commands and RPCs and stuff, but it is really, really a really cool service, a really easy way to go forward with multiplayer that doesn't require having third-party stuff in your games and whatnot. And so, yeah, hopefully you found it enjoyable. As always, if you want to have any questions, you have any questions to ask, you can reach out to us on Twitter at Unity3D, at the Ant Ranch, at Wool Goldstone, at Matt Mirrorfish, or at Mike Geig, which is me. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a very fantastic holiday season. If you have more questions about some of the shooter stuff, do check out Merry Fragmas from last December. A lot of that stuff is still relevant, and maybe learn a little bit more about the first-person stuff that way. And otherwise, take care, and again, thank you all very much.